Questo è un luogo che genera
C'è
dialogo,
qualcuno che si impegna, che si
che
batte.
approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza
La società non
nel
può
cuore
accettare un
ferito
mondo senza
del
speranza.
presente. E tutto questo
Proporre con la propria vita
esiste anche grazie a te.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session. I'm Daniela Fattarella, Director of Save the Children Italy. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today, together with the colleagues and friends coming from different areas, and I'm going to introduce them in a moment. But before opening our debate, we would like to show you a short video that is going to be very meaningful, more than many other words. So first, the video. It's not just the usual news, it's their life. Living in war means that Abdullah and his family have lost everything. There's no water, no gasoline, no electricity, no food, no means of communication. Living in war means that Isa no longer has a home. My whole life has been bombings, evacuations, and tents since I was born. Living in war means that Nabil's mother cannot afford to feed him. Before the war, we were better off. We could get food. Living in war means hunger, poverty, missing school, die. Every war is a war against children.
Bene, penso.
Right, I think that the last sentence you read in this video, every war is a war against the children, that was said by our founder in 2019, is really topical. I would like to do a survey, but there's no time now to do that. So to ask you how many children you think are living in a conflict zone. It's more than 440 million children. It's the highest number. It has doubled since the last 30 years, and every day more than 30 children die in conflict zones. These are numbers that we may receive as cold figures, but behind these children there are stories, there are names, hopes and dreams. Last April I went to Syria, and I have an image of what you have seen, of a devastation that is really huge. It's really incredible. It is perceived in the places. It can be perceived because of all the places that have been destroyed, but also because of what you can hear from children and from the families. This is a mixed desire between the fear of what has happened and the desire of imagining a future reconstruction. I came back with great anguish, but then a sense of hope followed, an enormous sense of hope, with this willingness to restart again. So before introducing the guests and opening the debate, I would like you to think about a couple of points. When a child is in a conflict zone, he or she is hit twice. First of all, because they are hit in their present. The war destroys their childhood. It's stopped, it's broken. Hospitals and schools are destroyed. Children are separated from their families. But then consider how they are struck in their future, much more than an adult person, because that's the time when children should have the right to play, to be thoughtless, to have education, not to think how I can save myself from bombs. Today in Gaza, we have children telling us that they want to die because they want to go to heaven because they can find food there. That is what happens to children in a conflict zone. That will have impact on their future. We often think that children in conflict zones should be protected, they should be saved at that time. That is fair enough, it's right. The first operations in an emergency conflict are life-saving operations. However, we should also remember that children in a war conflict area is not hit just in the body, but also in the mind, in their mind health, mental health. So another point that we have to consider is to observe what happens in the children in these conflict zones about the physical well-being, but also psychological well-being, because psychological well-being is underestimated many times. This can tell us how to create safe places where children can find their child dimension again, so the right to play, the right to find a sort of school system, a sort of daily routine, and also the importance of children to have someone to listen to them. That is the central topic of today's debate, listening to these children in conflict zones to give them the necessary space when they have to go through a conflict. This is something that none of us would like to have for themselves or for their children, and also to listen to children when we start thinking about how to rebuild a country. So asking them what they expect. Today here with me, there are people coming from different actors, different areas. As Save the Children, we have the chance to interact with them, and they'll give us their ideas on this topic, and they'll help us understand why it is important to have a plurality of actors that may give their help when we work in a zone, in a conflict zone, and thinking about how to reconstruct after the war. Sonia Kush, to my right, she is our country director today in Ukraine, and in the past she was in Syria. This woman has extensive experience in humanitarian emergency situations. Next to me, Stefano Gatti, Director General of Italy's cooperation. He defines himself as a manager, not as a diplomat, concrete man, a person with whom we have had many exchanges over the last few years. To my left, Giulio Bartolini, professor at the University of Rome III and director of the International Humanitarian Law Legal Clinic, an law expert in conflict zones. And then Angelica Crystal Donati, who is a business person, and she is president of Ance Giovani, and she can give us the view of reconstruction through the perspective of young people. I am very pleased to have Sonia with us, who has arrived directly from Ukraine to share her thoughts and her view in a crisis context. Everything is going to be held in Italian, but I will ask the question in English.
Real pleasure, and I know you have a very long-standing experience in context of war, and we would like to ask you a few questions. The very first one is, which are the main challenges that children face when they are in a context of crisis? And also, how Save the Children approach children in that context, and how we want to protect and involve them, not only during the emergency, but also in the process of reconstruction. So how do we want children to feel that they are an actor and not only a subject in a world made by adults and not for children? You
Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'll start with quoting 13-year-old Yasmin from Gaza. She said to us, "My dreams, I want to be a doctor so I can treat injured people." These words represent the drive within every child to not only heal, but also to contribute and build a better future, even while in the chaos of a conflict. Today, we gather in Rimini, united by our shared commitment to listen to children and acknowledge the role that they play in the long-term recovery of their countries. Conflicts leave long-lasting impacts on children. The loss of loved ones, the destructions of homes and schools, the constant fear of violence, these are experiences that no child should ever have to endure. We met 11-year-old Maria in Ukraine, who was forced to leave her village, and she said, "I want to go home so badly. I miss my cat, but my house is destroyed." These words summarize the profound sense of loss and displacement that affects countless children caught in the crossfire. They remind us that war is not an abstract concept. It is a lived reality for millions of children who are affected by its destructive force. Save the Children has made tremendous efforts to understand and address the consequences of conflict on children. This work can be very challenging, and it is also time sensitive. I remember working in Northeast Syria, and for the first time entering a prison for boys with perceived association to ISIS. I met a 16-year-old boy from Australia who just looked at me and said, "You're with Save the Children? We've been here for 2 years now. Where have you been, and why didn't you get here sooner?" No single entity can address these challenges alone, certainly not even for those boys. And I don't want to be too theoretical, so let me tell you how this looks on the ground. I've been working in Ukraine for 3 years now. In 2022, our main focus was simply to help people survive the full-scale invasion. If they needed to evacuate, we could support with moving them to safer areas. If they needed supplies, we could provide kits. This is just basic humanitarian response. However, we also knew that we needed to consider the long-term well-being of children caught in the conflict in order to put them on the path to recovery as soon as possible. I'll give you the examples of 2 different groups of children that we focused on. Both of these groups will play an important role in determining what kind of country Ukraine will be once the guns fall silent. These are 1, children who are living in institutions, and 2, youth. As you may know, Ukraine has one of the highest rates of child institutionalization in the world. In 2022, there were around 100,000 children living or studying in over 700 institutions in the country. 15,000 of those children had a disability. Life in these institutions is almost impossible to describe. So I'll share the words of one young man who grew up in an institution. He said his only wish in life is that no other Ukrainian child should ever have the memory of growing up in an institution. The ongoing war significantly deepened the protection risks faced by these children. Several institutions were evacuated abroad, including to Italy. The government of Ukraine had made many attempts to reform the child care system over the last several years, but none of these efforts were successful, mainly due to a lack of coordinated commitment and action from the many different actors involved in this ecosystem. Now, the conflict made these reform efforts even more difficult. Social services were reduced as the military effort was prioritized. We needed to support these children and help move them to family-based care in the middle of a conflict. But there were so many actors and steps involved in making this a success. First, there needed to be enough families to take care of these children. This means that the different ministries needed to be staffed with social workers. The justice system would need more judges and lawyers to run a family-based care system. The country would need new laws, new expertise, and so on and so forth. Every time we thought we had addressed one challenge, another one appeared. The government of Ukraine cannot address this complex issue alone. Civil society cannot do it alone, and the international community cannot do it alone. It is clear that to support the lasting, successful recovery of this group of children, it will need the joint and coordinated efforts at the whole of government and whole of society level with international support, including from the EU. The EU also cannot limit its role to funding. It needs to provide expertise and leadership backed by the strong moral clarity around the need for reform. Otherwise, the risk is that these children will become a tick-the-box exercise that is part of Ukraine's bigger EU accession effort. Another group of children that will have a profound impact on Ukraine's recovery and on its future is youth. This is the group that is trying to lay the ground for its future now, but they don't know what path to take. In conversations that I've had with youth across Ukraine, in addition to the obvious safety and security concerns, their top concern is the lack of a clear vision for their future. Save the Children is working with youth in Mykolaiv, which was a frontline city in 2022, but is still subject to regular attacks and shelling. We are working on an area-based recovery approach that links humanitarian response to development. It looks at all the different components in a defined geographic area, such as markets, schools, water systems, and governance, and tries to plan how all of these need to function together after the war. We started developing this model by simply listening to youth, who have a very important stake in the future of their city. 17-year-old Olga from Mykolaiv told us, "We should listen more to young people. They know what they're talking about, they know what they want, they know what problems they have and how to solve them, and they have ideas." It became clear to us very quickly that the youth agreed on 3 priorities. First, they want to get a good quality education, which is very difficult when most are in their 5th year of remote online learning due to COVID and conflict. Second, they want to have good job opportunities. And third, they strongly emphasized a need for support with their mental health. The ongoing war, combined with increasing challenges around social cohesion and the lack of a clear understanding of their future prospects, are all combining to cause them mental distress. We then supported youth to engage directly with government officials. To their credit, the authorities of Mykolaiv created local and regional youth councils. However, there is still a lack of appreciation of the need to involve children and youth in recovery planning. Some government officials said that they don't consider the youth councils appropriate to inform their decision-making, as the councils are not independent and capable. The children respond that these are old and tired stereotypes from the Soviet era. While many officials and private sector representatives present a vision of Mykolaiv's recovery largely in terms of ambitious infrastructure projects, these vibrant youth remind them who Mykolaiv is being rebuilt for. They love their city, but they do say that if their priorities are not taken seriously and factored into recovery planning, they will likely make the decision to not only leave Mykolaiv, but they could simply leave Ukraine and start a new life outside. Let's take Syria as another example. Specifically, the role that education is going to play in recovery and reconstruction. The economic decline that Syria experienced because of years of conflict had a profound effect on children's education. Many boys were taken out of school to work and support their families, and girls were often taken out for early marriage. Added to the economic decline was the significant damage and destruction to schools, which is now estimated at more than 40% of all pre-war education facilities. To make things even more complicated, and Syria's education landscape was fragmented by competing systems. Over the last 10 years, children across Northeast, Northwest, and government-controlled areas of Syria all studied using different curricula depending on their region. Adding to this, Syrian refugee children in Turkey, Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, Iraq also all ended up in different educational systems. This fragmentation has created a massive patchwork of educational experiences. Today, there are 5 different curricula being taught inside Syria, and the Ministry of Education is debating whether to simply accept this reality or find ways to create buy-in for one Syria. This diversity in educational backgrounds, while surely enriching, will likely create barriers to recovery and reconstruction in Syria. As you well know, education is not just a priority for recovery, it is also a tool for recovery and peace. Children will understand what happened in Syria in the last decades from education. Education can help build an understanding of what it means to be a Syrian and undo the seeds of conflict. Even 10-year-old Amir understands that it is the plurality that matters. As he told our team, "I'm clever and strong. I want to become a doctor, someone who helps people. But I also think that every job is important. Whether you become a doctor, engineer, or something else, Syria will need you in the future." The key for Syria today, and this is also an area where we can support, is to work with different actors in Syrian society to make sure that a whole Syria, with all of its diverse ethnic, religious, and linguistic components, emerges as part of recovery. Most importantly, to ensure that this vision has a chance to succeed, one of the key components will be to listen to children. They have diverse backgrounds and are coming from different countries to a Syria that they don't know. Just yesterday, one of my colleagues, who was a Syrian refugee in Turkey, moved his whole family back to Syria. His 7-year-old daughter, Ayla, sent in a voice note from the border crossing, and she said, "I love Syria. I wish Syria is safe and there are nice playgrounds so we can all play together, adults and children, and everyone can be happy." We would do well to listen to Ayla and her friends. So when discussing recovery and reconstruction processes, I can say that there is an easy part and there is a difficult part. The easy part is that we know where to start. We need to listen to children. The world children live in is essentially the result of decisions made by us, adults, and we rarely ask them, "What do you want?" Children, of course, need to be protected, but they also have the right to be heard. We can't dismiss them, exclude their voices, and then wonder why the future is not fit for them. And now on to the difficult part, which is we need to work together. Rebuilding a society after war is not only about bricks and mortars, it's about bringing together many institutions that were not designed to move in the same direction at the same time, at the same speed. While universities, government, the private sector, NGOs, and unions each bring vital expertise to the recovery and reconstruction phase, they also bring different incentives, languages, timetables, and definitions of success. So acknowledging this reality is the first step to create joint platforms, shared metrics, and trust-building investments. To conclude, efforts by local, national, and international actors involved in recovery must be coordinated and complementary. This can be done first by streamlining coordination between international actors, ideally within the framework of oversight and ownership by the government. Second, local civil society actors should be recognized as key stakeholders. And lastly and critically, children's voices and opinions should be listened to. I will leave you with the words of 10-year-old Sami from Syria, who, after losing his home and family, declared, "I will rebuild my life, brick by brick, until I can smile again." This is the spirit that must guide our efforts, the vision that must inspire our actions, and the bricks need to come from us, each one of us shouldering some of the burden, but working together to deliver them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Grazie mille, Sonia. Io mi porto.
Thank you, Sonia. I have many take-home messages from what Sonia has said. First of all, the question that was asked by the Child to Save the Children, "Why have you come so late?" I received that question so many times. First of all, first time by an Afghan killed in Lampedusa, "Why weren't you there when I needed you?" And that question is always a very difficult question. First of all, there is no answer. And for me, it always has a certain meaning. We have an accountability towards these children. And they are very direct in bringing you down to your role, your job, your task, what you have to do for them. And this, in a war context, is always asked by kids to adult people because they didn't look for that situation. That's not what they want. That's not their desire. And the other take-home message is this concept of participation. At some point, Sonia said that the easy thing that we have to do is that we have the children participate, but then it is difficult to make this participation an active listening on the part of the decision makers. And the third point is, what do the children want? Now we have the example of Nikolai in Ukraine, but education and mental health support is emerging everywhere in the world. where there is a war, because children want to go to school because it's a safe place. There is a convention really that prohibits bombing hospitals and schools, in fact. And then the school is the only projection they have towards the future. And mental health support because they have fear. They need to find spaces where they can talk and they can feel supported. All this emerged from a conversation we had before coming here, where we said that in an emergency context, there is no way to find a one-size-fits-all solution. And here with us is Stefano Gatti, Director General of, for Italian Cooperation, and he will help us understand what the role of the Italian government can be, as today it is involved in supporting Italian cooperation without taking step backwards, because we see a decrease in funding in many other contexts. So what is the role of the government also in taking on board the needs of the children? And if we consider more evolved contexts in war contexts, like in Ukraine, there could be avenues for recovery and rebuilding. So what can be done there? So thank you for being with us today. Thank you, Daniela. I have some thoughts I would like to share in this debate. Of course, in this context, we talk from our perspective, even if we know that we have to work all together, but we play a role. So first of all, let me say thank you to Save the Children for their role. It is the biggest Italian NGO, and for their advocacy capacity as they bring us the urgency of problems. Today's event is really fitting in this hall, as we wrote here, no crisis is far, and Italy is a G7 country, so it is one of the leader countries, donor countries at a world level. And the problem is that there is a proliferation of crises. There are so many crises around us. If we consider where Italy is located, we can find a lot of crises. We see different maps in this exhibition around in this hall, and there you see that there is really a crown of conflicts around Italy. So we really understand that no crisis is far from us and far from our public opinion. And here we also try to talk about these crises. Save the Children rightly focuses on the devastation and the emergencies caused by war for children. As an association, we adopted some guidelines for children protection and adolescents protection. We fund projects that must consider this dimension of children and adolescents. We all agree on the fact that we have to have a dialogue with young people and to listen to them. And Daniela said that this is applicable to every context, and conflicts are the strongest moment of suffering for childhood and young age. It's not the only time, unfortunately. There may be situations where children don't have food when they go to school. So that's another kind of crisis that is still affecting children. So children demand education. They want to go to school. And whenever they are deprived from going to school, they have a crisis. They ask themselves, what's the point? They have an existential crisis. And the other important point is about the consequences of mental health due to crisis situations. And conflicts, of course, are devastating in this respect. And we also see this in our hall here, in our exhibition, when we consider the crisis that as a Ministry of Foreign Affairs we try to deal with. We want to understand how we can contribute as a country together with the international community to solve crisis. And on the other hand, we need to understand how to support Italian people that are affected, are involved in crisis with our emergency units. So the mental health consequences are emerging more and more. We had to interrupt some projects. In Gaza, for example, we had a big project on the consequences on mental health for young children and also on women. I, of course, agree with what was mentioned before. I'm not here to question whether it is true or false. Of course, every war is a war against the children, and it has devastating consequences on children. Children want education. They want to have their mental health protected. So our point is, what can we do as donor, as a G7 country? As a country, we are not in a position to solve a full crisis, but as government, we want to play a role to be a factor for solving crisis, to have a political dialogue. That's the position that we take as a government, to favor dialogue in situations where dialogue seems to be impossible. And then with field operations, with partners, associations, with from the civil society, we have also the World Food Program here. That is one of the first humanitarian associations in the realm of the United Nations. So what we can do is a bit limited. We know we live in a context where on the one side we have so many crises, so many humanitarian crises at the same time are something unique. And at the same time, there's less financial availability. A couple of days ago, we discussed this in another event with reference to the need for funding in humanitarian crisis, which used to be solved in 50–60% of cases. We have big funders that have disappeared. One of them completely drew back. There are other important supporters, but G7 is the only country of the G7 that didn't decrease their funding for international cooperation. So we have our national budget and we have a funding scheme that is not earmarked. That is, this is for humanitarian emergency, this is for development activities. There is one single allotment, and we have to decide how much of this can be used for humanitarian emergencies and how much is used for development. So this is then a political and technical problem. What can be done with the funds that we have? If we use them all to the favor of humanitarian crisis, we will stop funding development activities, and this is not good for contexts that are getting out of a crisis. And there are so many crises. Giovanni Brusco is the director of an emergency unit, and he's here with us. We don't have enough money for doing what we would like to do and what we are asked to do. So the first problem for a donor is to decide what to fund, depending on the context. And we have heard some situation in the presentation here, the situation of Ukraine, that is clearly an emergency. Italy has held the conference for the recovery of Ukraine. We had other important events, and the situation in Ukraine is a situation of a country that underwent an armed attack. It affects the whole country. This is a constant threat. You know that there's bombing that are being made more and more by the Russians in areas that are not directly affected by the conflict as such, but it is a way to make pressure. So there is this situation of insecurity, of anxiety that is created in the population, and which is so bad for children. And in our previous conversation, we were saying that Ukraine has its own government, which is fully operational. It has a strategy, it has some lines, and we can make an attempt to help that government in its strategic approach. We have to support and strengthen it. We have a terrible situation as the one in Gaza, where there isn't really one government. There are different parties of different nature that are trying to have the control of a territory that have been destroyed over time. So whom are you going to talk to? You have an occupying force. There is a force, well, there is not a force, it is a terrorist organization that has control over the territory. How can you play there? How can you talk to the interlocutors there? There is also a security matter. Some civil society organizations are making pressure on us because our organization doesn't authorize some organizations to intervene in the field, because our duty is also to protect the life and the security of our nationals. Some people ask us, can I go there? No. It's really likely that you're killed if you go there. So the Italian state has a constitutional duty of protecting you. But another important example is Syria. Syria is a completely different situation. A regime collapsed. Now there is a new situation that raises a number of questions. Yesterday there was a very interesting event with the Minister Tajani and the Archbishop of Aleppo, and this new, I wouldn't call it a regime, but this governmental structure that is in power, it is a governmental structure that is taking care of the population and wants to preserve minorities with different faiths as well. Is that true? Isn't that true? Well, we have some points of contact there, but political decisions must be considered there. There are important decisions for the Christian minority, for example, and the Archbishop of Aleppo said that, yes, we want to believe in that governmental structure. Let's try and support that. If you say that you are respecting minorities and keeping the country compact and united, we are there. We are ready. So it's a very different kind of situation. The kinds of tools, who to support and who to talk to are very important points in a context where financial resources are always too little. The United Nations say that we have about 10% of the financial resources that are necessary, that would be necessary to face all the humanitarian crises. 20%. We're not talking about 60 or 70%. We just have 20% of the necessary resources. So we are far from the resources that we have. So what can we do? We have to make choices. Sometimes these are difficult choices. We have to be efficient as government with interlocutor. We have to work in a team. That's the new strategic sense also for the Italian population, to develop projects together as a team, and at the same time to work in the political side to solve crises. These are all activities that are being deployed by the Italian government. And to conclude my intervention, I would say that we are at the top of the number of crises that we may imagine. As a diplomat or as a manager, I would like to say this. As never before, Italy has had now a big role. Our country is not a secondary country. It is a country that in important crises is now called to play a role. It is seen as a country that is able to play a role. So there is really a responsibility to act, to represent this role that now we have. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stefano. And I've really listened to many interesting points from your presentation. First, the name that you have decided to give to this hall, No Crisis is Far, because it implies a proximity that is not just physical, but it also a proximity of approach and of strategy. In a world, as you have emphasized, the number of humanitarian crises has increased so much. If we say that no crisis is far, there is no difference. That's a fundamental point, because I always go back to the question of our children. We have to go back to the children. That child asked, why did you come so late? So no crisis is far means that we cannot be indifferent. So this title, this slogan, so to say, reminds us of this. And the second point is that Since no crisis is far, it is also true that we are living a time where we have a big lack of structural funding as never before. So it's important to define clearly what the intervention priorities are, not just the places, but also the issues. And this has been emphasized by our colleague, the importance of education, putting children at the center. And third extremely important point is to work in unison as a system. When there are little resources, there are many conflicts, we have to work as a system. And Italian cooperation has been leading the way in this sense, in a very clear way, putting together, as we have tried to do today here as well, different actors to work in synergy and to use resources in the best possible way to solve crises. Crises are now prolonged, and it is difficult to draw a clear line between what it means to manage the imminent crisis and to work in the medium and long run. So I would now like to continue with our next speaker, Professor Giulio Bartolini. I would like to ask him a double question. The first question is this. Today we live in a world in which crises are really erasing the international humanitarian right. So as a humanitarian operators, up until now, we thought that we could count on a legal framework that would help us operate in certain contexts. We have seen this violated in multiple occasions. Gaza is a clear reminder of this. So in this highly complex context, the role of the universities and the university network of children can play a really important role to navigate these complex times, new times. So what could be the role of the university, of the academic world in helping us more and more to transform children's participation in effective participation that can influence the political choices? Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. Yes, I would like to link up with what you said in the beginning when you talked about the figures of these crises. So 440 million young people being victims of wars and conflicts. So we risk to turn all this into faraway crisis. So I think that this title, No Crisis Far Away, is really, really appropriate. And we should never forget the crisis of individuals, and especially when it comes to very young victims of armed conflict. Well, I cannot, avoid to mention the testimonies of two hibakusha, two survivors of the atomic bomb who were before in another panel, and their experience, they lived this terrible experience in a nuclear holocaust when they were just very, very young children, respectively 2 and 3 years old. So, and that's terrible. So the fact that so many million young people can, be traumatized adults, and so many others in the future risk to be victims of warfare is terrible. And so we are here to remind ourselves of that. And their testimony was a testimony without hatred. And so those words are even more important. We really need to make people aware of the importance of protect children, because their future needs to be secured. They need to become builders of a future, of their future, and of states without wars. So it is really up to us to do something useful, practical, and university can do something. Universities can and should offer research-based education involving young people, trying to think about the situation lived by children. And we have this network that is made of 50 universities. And Italy is part of this initiative, but we also have universities from Congo, Ghana, Guinea, Kosovo, Iraq, Nigeria, states that unfortunately make the headlines because there are conflicts, there are crises, and that list of countries in a crisis unfortunately keeps getting longer and longer. And so we really try to do something to contribute to a greater contribution of young people, of children, and also young students to what can be said. The best thing would be to have a change of paradigm. So it's not just about providing support and assistance to these children, but as it was said, they should also become relevant stakeholders contributing to activities. Our university network carried out several activities, for instance, offering training courses aimed at protecting young people in armed conflicts from a legal point of view, but not only. And we have global classes opened all over the world so that we can involve students from Kosovo to Iraq, from Italy to the US, so they share common classes that favor exchange. And again, this seems to be just a passive thing, but we do much more. For instance, it is important also to develop common research activities involving young people in interdisciplinary activities. So we have cooperation initiatives of transnational nature that involve stakeholders from Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So young people can be actively involved, and certainly many of them have experienced in the first place war, and so certainly they can give a very important contribution when it comes to these topics. And then when it comes to the specific topic of the meeting, the network, thanks to the cooperation of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, developed a new project about the role played by young people in mediation processes. And the final goal is to favor education towards dialogues and peacekeeping activities in warfare contexts that certainly see a great involvement of local stakeholders. These trained youngsters will become trainers in their capacity, and so this is absolutely important because this can then lead to further developments. So university should do their best in order to make these topics, in particular the protection of minors in armed conflicts, as crucial as possible, because we should not be observers, but we should be involved and create knowledge by involving young people. So young people certainly play a crucial role. Last but not least, going back to your question about possible activities, well, certainly university is not the only actor that can be proactive, because other stakeholders can contribute not just scientifically, but also in other terms. So there's plenty of opportunity, even in sectors that may sound distant. For instance, when it comes to the activities currently carried out by activity, the Ministry of Defense is developing a specific international law military handbook. So this is something collecting key guiding principles about international rights that should be complied with by states. And often these documents, these conventions, treaties, or other kinds of agreements need then to be turned into practical indications, pragmatic guidelines. So a military handbook is aimed at turning into an understandable language these kinds of legal messages that sometimes risk to remain too abstract and technical and therefore useless. I am the coordinator of this working group together with other colleagues at the Ministry of Defense, and in particular we have emphasized the importance of schooling and education during armed conflicts. Italy is also part of the Safe Food Declaration, and Save the Children played an important advocacy role involving states in reaffirming, as Daniele said, that conflicts can have an impact on the future. So denying minors schooling can be devastating for their future growth and development. And again, it is important to reach out to all the relevant stakeholders, to tell them exactly what to do. For instance, avoiding using schools in warfare, because sometimes the, 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 the buildings where schools are used for military activities during conflicts. And so we always remind countries that they should avoid to use school buildings as places for military actions. And so again, the areas of intervention are many. It is absolutely paramount to protect the right to education also with these kind of solutions, because when you destroy, when you tear down the buildings where schools are, you destroy a physical place that allows young generations to, be educated, but also you destroy that opportunity for a whole generation. So again, you deeply undermine the future of that country. And so again, we are trying to define specific targeted actions aimed at suggesting what to do in such context. So when, the implication in an armed conflict is inevitable, and so it is important to stick to the specific rules aimed at protecting education, because education is really a key pillar for the life of any state, especially for the future of that state and its generations. Thank you.
Grazie mille.
Thank you, Giulio. Thank you, and well, let's go back to protecting educational facilities in armed conflicts. Well, I want to share a personal story. When I saw for the first time the Zara camp in Jordan with more than 100,000 Syrian refugees, I remember a little girl who had spent 3 years there, and she saw building our kindergarten. And when she was asked, "Why do you come here every day? We're going to finish this." Well, she said, "No, I come here every day because I want to check on you, because I want to go back to school." And this little girl, when we inaugurated the kindergarten, she went to school with a blue princess dress. And the mother said, I don't know why I took this dress when we escaped from Syria, but now I know I took it because she would wear it today when you opened this new school for the children of the refugee camp. And this image will stick with me forever. And so this is what gives me motivation every day. Education is paramount, is central. Thanks for reminding us of the role that universities can play when it comes to training, but also when it comes to somehow making the most of this training and education. Because, for instance, it is fantastic to be able to train young people to peacekeeping and then involving them in training activities for other young people. And again, young people can certainly be involved. And I think that they should also be involved in the writing of this military handbook that you are preparing. And last but not least, we have another speaker. I'm very happy to have with us Angela Donati, and especially to be able to hear a different voice about the role of entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs of the building sector, because when we talk about reconstruction, they are important, and especially in contexts like Ukraine. Thank you, Angelica. The floor is yours. Good evening. Thank you, Daniela, for involving me.
It's a great honor to be here, really. Well, recovery, let's take the example of Ukraine. Of course, it is a massive recovery intervention that will be necessary at the end of this war. It cannot be seen through the lens of the physical reconstruction only, because we are talking about 500 billion euro of investments. We're talking about reconstructing 30% of dwellings, 25,000 kilometers of roads, 25% of the railway network near the border. So it's a huge investment. So in addition to focusing on concrete physical construction that will be achieved over time, but it will take time to achieve the final result, we also have to start from the social reconstruction objective of the country, because it will take decades to go back to the situation as before, or even better, because the concept of a recovery in Ukraine would be build back better, so a better result with respect to the pre-war situation. If we don't invest in the society of the country, it will be impossible to achieve the expected result. And concerning the point of view of our companies, building companies, social reconstruction must be based on the education of new companies. I'm saying this because the problem of competencies and skills in the building sector is really serious across the board in all the countries, not just a problem with Ukraine, it's a problem all over the world. Unfortunately, we have this general idea that has been overcome a little bit, but it's always considered as an industry that is tiring and dirty and poor, but as companies in Italy and also many other companies in other countries in the world, we are teaching young people that there are many career opportunities in this sector that can give them a lot of satisfaction. So when I'm thinking about recovery activities in all the countries that are in war, but let's consider Ukraine now, I consider both physical interventions and intangible intervention for future generations that will carry out this development. I wanted to mention a small example that could be a virtual best practice that could be exported to Ukraine, and why not even elsewhere, that we young people in my association have been done for the last few years, which is the macro school ideas contest. This is a contest for secondary school between 13 15 years. It is a delicate moment for young children, it's a time when they have to decide what they want to do in their life, but maybe it's a bit early also to decide concretely. So what they decide to follow as high school then will be determining for subsequent higher education and their future careers. So we go to secondary schools and talk to children and talk to families about the beauty of working in our field. And we go there to talk to them, not just for orienteering. We also want to do activities like games, and that's why we designed this contest. We want to show the children how beautiful it is to design something that then will be created. So we had 2,600 children taking part in this contest in the latest edition. So first they had to design their ideal school. That during the COVID they had to design their ideal house. And now they do projects of urban regeneration. And the projects that win at a local and national level then are sent to the municipalities where these children come from, so that these ideas can become concretely implemented. So these children propose ideas on real places of their communities. They are listened to by the local councillors, the mayors, and in some cases these projects are really at an early stage, so they can be then followed up to be applied concretely. I read a study that you carried out on the children of Ukraine, and one thing that struck me was that these children need really to be listened to and to be inquired about the future of their country. So something that is very small, very local, even with the support of Ukrainian builders. There is an association called the CBU, which is part of our association. We signed an agreement in 2022. So talking with you today, I had this idea. We could try and help the CBU to do what we do in Italy with the schools and children in Ukraine, to make them feel involved in rebuilding the future of the cities where they live and where in the future we hope they will work. Thank you. Thank you very much, Angelica. I do hope that Build Back Better is something that will be considered as a common denominator in the recovery, Ukraine and other conflict zones. And thank you for the example that you mentioned, because it really shows how listening and participation can turn into something concrete and can show children that this kind of listening is not done as an end in itself, but as something that will change the places where they will live in the future. We got to the conclusion of our debate, so allow me to thank again our guest speakers, Sonia, Stefano, Giulio and Angelica, and I will try to draw some conclusions from the many interesting points that have been mentioned. The first, and we want to repeat it over and over again, there is something that cannot be renounced in war, which is education. We must guarantee that children do not stop their educational process, because this can safeguard their present and their future, and with their future, the future of that country, and with the future of that country, the future of the world. This is not a rhetorical operation. No crisis is far. If you look at the world map, we are at the center of this crisis. The second point is this: children do not only have the right to be listened to, but adults have a moral obligation for this. When children ask, who is the responsible for this war? Why am I in this context? This is the adults' world, so we owe them to listen to them. And I'm proud of being part of an organization that is looking for and creating for this listening operation in many places in the world. In Ukraine, what we did We didn't do that just to write a report. We did that to transform something into concrete actions when the recovery starts. So this listening operation is then made concrete. So this way, children will feel that they don't just undergo something, and they're not just victims of something, but they can be builders. And the last point is the point about the small brick that we see in the logo of the meeting of Rimini, the brick that Sonia mentioned at the beginning when she said, the Syrian kid said, I will rebuild my world brick by brick up until when I find my smile again. Those bricks must be given by us. And here we have representatives of institutions, universities, businesses, international corporations, because we all play a role, and this role cannot be played on an individual basis. So nobody can save themselves by themselves. And a small anecdote I want to share in closing this. In Romania, I met so many Ukrainian kids, boys and girls, that fled from war. And I focused on a drawing that was done by a little girl, which looked like the Teletubbies, the small puppets designed, used to draw my niece too. And I asked, what are they? And she said, it's me and my friends in space, because I don't want to live on Earth, because there is war on Earth and I don't want to live in the war. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is our responsibility to do everything possible for that kid to draw herself again on Earth. Thank you for being here with us today. We will play one last video, and before that, let me make an announcement which is very important, because we are here as hosts at the meeting of Rimini, which is the result of a collective effort. So you are all invited to support the meeting organization. You will see how to donate so that this event can be even richer in the future. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Thank you. If I could write to the most influential people, I would ask them to end the war and bring peace and security back to the world. There's no life when you're at war. With peace, however, there is hope, there is life. I would like peace in our village so that we can go home. I would like a peaceful sky. What do you need to be happy? No more bombs flying over our heads. I dream that we children can live in peace, that the war will end, and that we can return to our homes. Love means caring for one another. Love brings peace and happiness. My brother and I want to live in peace like all children around the world. All children around the world deserve peace.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito, del presente. E tutto questo
Proporre con la propria vita
esiste anche grazie a te.